Hold it right there, Smith.
Don't move or you're a dead man.
Gonna shoot me?
No, we're taking you back to Missouri. For good.
The governor of Missouri demanded Joseph be extradited to stand trial, again on false charges. Sadly, the Illinois authorities honored the demand.
In May of 1843, things had kind of settled down in Nauvoo. Now, Joseph Smith had gone in hiding back in September of 1842 to escape from the persecutions of Missouri, trying to drag him back there and have him executed. But for the last several months, he has been living very comfortably in Nauvoo. He has been tending to his duties both as mayor and as general of the Nauvoo Legion, as well as his duties as president of the church. For the most part, for the month of May, and for a good portion of the month of June, things are just business as usual. Saints abroad are being called to gather into Nauvoo. There is a conference in England, late May, I think it's early June actually. Over 7,000 people attend. These are all saints still living in England. They have not yet emigrated to the United States. There is also, in Nauvoo, Joseph Smith invites an Episcopal preacher to stand up and preach to the saints. And we may think this is kind of odd in the modern day. To us it sounds a little odd. But Joseph Smith was very open to letting anybody preach. And as long as they preached what he agreed with, he let it alone. Now, occasionally, he would correct them. In late June, things get exciting again. On June 16th, Governor Ford of Illinois writes out a writ of arrest for Joseph Smith. Gives it into the hand of a sheriff from Jackson County, Missouri. So we know this is all on the up and up. Now, a Judge Adams sends a warning to Nauvoo to warn Joseph Smith about the impending arrest. Judge Adams, I do believe by this time, has been baptized, so he is a member. He sends this warning to Nauvoo, but by the time it gets there on the 18th, he sends it on the 16th. On the 18th, it arrives in Nauvoo, but Joseph Smith has left Nauvoo for the town of Dixon. So the warning gets to the 12 apostles, and Elder Markham and Elder Clayton are sent to Dixon to warn Joseph Smith. They reach Dixon on the 21st, warn Joseph Smith, and he goes to the Wasson farm, I believe that's how you pronounce it, the Wasson farm just outside of Dixon to stay the night with him and his family. Emma and his children are with them. On the 23rd, Sheriff Reynolds of Jackson County, Missouri, and Constable Harmon from Carthage, Illinois, arrive in Dixon. They hear that Joseph is at the Wasson farm, and they go out there to arrest him. They do not present a writ of arrest. They were given one by the governor, but they never present it because the writ's not really legal in the first place. So they take him at gunpoint, keep jabbing him in the ribs hard with the barrel of the guns. They won't let him return to the house to get his hat and coat. They won't let him contact anybody. Elder Markham is there, and he comes out and stands with Joseph Smith, challenges them, and they keep they say, Joseph Smith, if you talk again, we're going to shoot you. If you move in a way that we don't like, we're going to shoot you. When Elder Markham comes out and asks what's going on, they turn around and say, if you say a word, we're going to shoot you too. So Joseph Smith says, well, I want to get a writ of habeas corpus. They say, no, you're not allowed to do that. They forcibly stuff him into a wagon and are going to leave without letting him retrieve any of his belongings or say goodbye to his family. Elder Markham, he takes the reins away from him and holds the horses until Emma can bring Joseph's hat and coat, and Joseph can say goodbye to Emma, let her know what's going on. They then go to Dixon, and the sheriff and constable lock Joseph Smith in a room in the local inn, and they stand guard, one inside, one outside at all times. He asks for a lawyer. He tells them he wants counsel. They say he's not going to get it, and if he doesn't shut up, they're going to shoot him. So he goes to the window and he calls to people outside saying, I am being kidnapped and held illegally. Get me some counsel. A lawyer shows up, says he wants to talk to Joseph. He says, counsel. They chase him out. They slam the door in his face. A second lawyer comes and says, we're his counsel. You need to let us see him. They slam the door in his face, won't let anybody see him. But then word of this gets to the owner of the inn, a man named Dixon, and the other people of the town, and the whole town basically surrounds the inn and tells the sheriff and constable that if they do not allow the lawyers to see Joseph Smith, that they're going to be arrested, that the people are not going to stand for this kind of unlawful behavior, and that they will enforce the law against the sheriff if he doesn't start complying. And so, under threat of the town, they let the lawyers come in. The lawyers then take word to the local chancery to get a writ of habeas corpus. On the this all happens on the 23rd. On the 24th, Clayton is sent back to Nauvoo to give word to the saints there. The writ of habeas corpus comes back from chancery to go to Lee County to be heard before the judge there. Reynolds and the constable, Sheriff Reynolds and the constable from Carthage, are also arrested by the town under writ of Elder Markham, but they are also granted a writ of habeas corpus, and so as a body they all go toward Ottawa, which is the county seat of Lee County. They have to stop off in a small town called Pawpaw, and there Joseph Smith preaches. Now, they didn't want, the sheriff and constable tried to stop him from preaching, but the people of Pawpaw stood up and said, no, we want to hear him, and if you don't let us hear him, we're going to chase you out because you guys are being unlawful. And so he is allowed to preach. While they are preaching, they get word that the judge in Ottawa has actually taken a trip to New York and is unavailable, and so they all return back to Dixon. So on the 25th, they return to Dixon. They receive a new writ of habeas corpus, which this time just says, to be seen by the closest jurisdiction that has the right of habeas corpus. When they receive this, it is decided that they will go to Quincy in Adams County to see Judge Stephen Douglas, the same Stephen Douglas who would later run against Abraham Lincoln in the 1860 presidential election. At this time, Elder Markham, who is a colonel in the Nauvoo Legion, is sent out ahead to find General Wilson Law of the Legion and inform him that Joseph is being transported to Quincy, because remember that William Clayton had gone to Nauvoo to muster the Legion to come to the assistance of Joseph Smith. So the whole party sets out to Quincy on the 26th, being led by the sheriff of Lee County, a Sheriff Campbell. He is escorting the prisoners, which is Joseph Smith, who is the prisoner of Sheriff Reynolds and Constable Wilson, but also Sheriff Reynolds and Constable Wilson are Sheriff Campbell's prisoners because they were arrested under the writ of Markham. So on the 26th, they head out. They travel about 40 miles. Elder Markham goes a bit farther to the town of Geneseo, I believe is how you pronounce it. On the 26th, they continue and they reach Geneseo around noon, where they then eat their noon meal. At this time, they are joined by an Elder Conover, I believe Peter Conover, and Elder Markham also returns to join them again. When Conover joins them, he tells them that there is a contingent of the Legion just behind them that will be joining them by the end of the day. And Sheriff Reynolds asks if there is a flack among the Legion. He is told yes, and he says, well, I am a dead man, because there is old feud between Reynolds and Flack. But Conover and Joseph both tell Reynolds that he will be safe. Now they do continue on. They leave Geneseo shortly after noon, and they continue on to the city of Andover for the night. In Andover, we have our first conspiracy, where Reynolds and Wilson, the sheriff and constable, make an agreement with the innkeeper, or that they will sneak Joseph Smith out in the night to Rock River, where there is a mob from Missouri waiting to take him back. This conspiracy is overheard by Elder Markham. He informs Sheriff Campbell, and Sheriff Campbell sets an extra guard over Joseph Smith so that they can't do anything to him that night. On the 28th, they continue their journey towards Quincy. As they are crossing a creek, just after crossing a creek, there's a second attempt to get Joseph Smith to Missouri, when Sheriff Reynolds and Constable Wilson say, now that we're at the creek and now we've crossed the creek, we will go to the mouth of Rock River and take a boat down to Quincy, which would be a faster trip. But Elder Markham says, no, we're not doing that. So they continue on land. They get to just outside the town of Monmouth, and there they get secure lodgings at a farm. That night, we have a third conspiracy when Reynolds and Wilson try to conspire with the son of the farmer to again take Joseph by night to Rock River and the Missouri mob. This time, it is Conover who overhears this conspiracy. He informs Sheriff Campbell as well as the farmer. They both get rather upset because the farmer's mad that they tried to drag his son into this. And so they go and I believe they put Reynolds and Wilson under guard. But they set a guard at night so that they can't sneak Joseph out. On the 29th, as they are approaching Nauvoo, Reynolds and Wilson try to force Joseph Smith under gunpoint to turn to the river. Markham then says, wait a minute, you disarmed Joseph Smith when you arrested him. Now that you're under arrest, Sheriff Campbell, would you please take their guns? They refuse to give them up, and Sheriff Campbell, he's only one man. He's like, okay, what do I do? We got two men with guns refusing to relinquish them. And Markham says, well, hey, we got the Nauvoo Legion here. As a sheriff, you have the authority to deputize them as your posse and take the guns by force. Which Sheriff Campbell says, okay, if they don't give me the guns, we'll do that. And so they give over the guns. After they are disarmed, there is a council between Joseph Smith, his lawyers, and Sheriff Campbell, where they all discuss it and they agree that Nauvoo has the right to hear cases of habeas corpus, that is within the city charter. And it is much closer than Quincy. And since the writ of habeas corpus that they were given simply says to go to the closest jurisdiction that can hear habeas corpus, it is agreed that Nauvoo is the best fit to fill this writ. So they turn to Nauvoo. Of course, Sheriff Reynolds and Constable Wilson, they don't like that idea. They try to prevent it, but there are two men. We got like probably 20 of the Nauvoo Legion in the group by this time. Sheriff Campbell, I think there are 4 lawyers. The two men aren't going to get their say, so they all turn to Nauvoo. On June 30th, Joseph Smith comes into Nauvoo. Now, they do send word at night, between the night of the 29th, they send a messenger to Nauvoo saying that Joseph Smith and company will be arriving around noon. So the city is prepared. He comes in, he actually gets in about 11:30. There's a big party, big celebration at the return of Joseph Smith. And they serve a large feast, a banquet in his honor. But Sheriff Reynolds and Constable Wilson are placed at the head of the table as the guests of honor. Immediately after this dinner's in the early afternoon. I believe it's around 4 or 4:30 that court is convened to hear the writ of habeas corpus. But Reynolds refuses to present the writ. The writ, when it was written out, was given to Sheriff Reynolds, ordering him to present Joseph Smith to the court to have a hearing on habeas corpus. And he refuses to present the writ that was given to him in Lee County by the Chancery Court up there. So Joseph Smith has to file petitions because Sheriff Reynolds is not actually following the law. So Joseph files his petitions. The court orders Joseph Smith to be placed in the custody of the marshal of the city of Nauvoo until the case can be completed, until the case is heard and ruled on. And then they recess for the day. It's about 6 o'clock at night at that time. Joseph Smith says, well, I got an appointment to go preach to the people. Is that okay? He says, as long as you are within the custody of the marshal, you can do what you want. So he goes and preaches. Reynolds and Wilson hear a little bit of his preaching, but they get mad at him. His preaching is to explain what's been happening and show the wickedness of Reynolds and Wilson. So they leave partway through the preaching, return to Carthage, swearing that they're going to raise a posse, a mob, to come down and take Joseph by force. Now on the next day, this is Saturday, the 1st of June, the court is reconvened. They hear all the testimony in the case, and they grant the writ of habeas corpus, they grant the habeas corpus, and Joseph is set at liberty. Once all this is done, once the court has been completed, Markham is sent to Carthage to see what Reynolds and Wilson are up to, and they are stirring up the pot. They are stirring up the people to rebellion and to mobocracy to go and take Joseph Smith by force. Now, I don't know if Reynolds and Wilson, they were technically under arrest, but they also had a writ of habeas corpus. I'm not sure how that turned out. But They are now stirring up the people of Carthage, and so it is easy to whip these guys into a mob. In the next several days, so this is July 1st, and the next revelation that Joseph Smith records is on July 12th. In these 10 or so days here, there is a lot of stuff going on. Reynolds and his constable, they do go to Carthage, they start stirring up the people. Now, Carthage has been very antagonistic against the church from the beginning. The people there have not liked the saints. And so they are easily whipped up into a kind of frenzy. They start forming into mobs. They start following Reynolds. Reynolds sends messages to the governor to ask for state assistance, raise a state militia to help us take Joseph Smith. On the other hand, the saints also send their messages to the governor, taken by Elder Markham, and explaining the whole procedure, what happened, why Joseph Smith was released, showing all the court documentation in the hearing on habeas corpus, and how it was completely legal. Reynolds is sending a message saying, oh, Joseph Smith, the Nauvoo Legion came out and attacked us and took Joseph Smith by force, and it's all nonsense, of course. The Nauvoo Legion came and very calmly escorted Joseph Smith to court. On the 10th, I believe, maybe the 9th, around there, the governor sends word to both Joseph Smith and to Sheriff Reynolds, telling them both that he's not going to do anything. He's not going to help either the saints or the sheriff from Missouri, but he is going to send his own agent out to investigate the whole thing, and when he gets a full understanding of the actual procedures of what actually happened to his satisfaction, then he will make a decision. And, he's basically saying, I'm not getting involved. When that happens, the Missouri mob that was on the Mississippi River waiting to take Joseph Smith away disbands and returns to Missouri. Reynolds returns to Missouri in defeat, and everything starts calming down again. Now, this whole thing is very nicely dramatized in the film Joseph, Prophet of the Restoration.
Don't move or you're a dead man.
Gonna shoot me?
No, we're taking you back to Missouri. For good.
The governor of Missouri demanded Joseph be extradited to stand trial, again on false charges. Sadly, the Illinois authorities honored the demand.
Faster.
Come on, boys!
Our men found him just before they crossed the Illinois-Missouri border.
Hold it right there! Stop where you're at!
Well, gentlemen, looks like I won't be going with you to Missouri today.
But just to show there are no hard feelings, why don't you be my guest tonight?
Gentlemen, I don't believe we've had the pleasure.
Might say we're the guests of honor.
Although we're given only a very condensed version of it. But it's a fun little episode in church history.